Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to the Clinical Trials Guru. This is also going on the podcast. Not sure what episode it's going to be on the podcast because we've been filming a lot, actually, Elizabeth. And today we've got a very special guest, Elizabeth Weeks Rowe. She's a CRA. Well, why don't you introduce yourself, Elizabeth?
Um, I would love to. Thanks for having me on. Elizabeth Weeks Rowe, clinical research training consultant, writer, work in study startup, and fan of yours, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we actually met once at a site selection visit years ago. So Elizabeth wrote this book, Clinical Research Trials and Triumphs. That's not her. Okay, that's her. You can see her on the screen. But this is a good book. I read it back in, let's see, 2015. Elizabeth, that's when you gave it to me.
I did.
I have the date on here. So it's a quick read, 60 some pages. There's not much written about this industry, especially not fiction. And this is fiction slash a lot of elements of reality in here. And it's basically, well, I'm going to read the back cover and then we can use those as talking points. So,
Sure.
a heartwarming novel following a nurse's journey into clinical research. So, tell us about your background, Lisa. Prior to research, Elizabeth, you titled this person as Lisa. So, uh, may not be based on you.
It's based on my experiences and the collective experiences of all the wonderful study coordinators that I've encountered since I started
Gotcha.
in clinical research 18 years ago. And now that I say it, I'm dating myself. Um, I was a nurse. I walked into Scripps Clinic in La Jolla looking for a nursing job, and I walked out as a study coordinator, not
Wow.
knowing what that meant. And you can probably relate to this. Back when I started in research, and you've been in research for a pretty long time, correct? So,
2005 full time, yeah.
okay, so that was still where they didn't have any of the training programs that they have now. Whereas I'd like to call it trial by fire assimilation, where we kind of took a research job and were thrown in and kind of trained by our monitors, trained by our coworkers, but had to learn a lot. And it's an effective way to learn, but it's kind of a scary way to learn. And this
Stressful.
book is kind of about a nurse who falls into research.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Based on my experiences, but based on other people's experience as well. It is a work of fiction.
A work of fiction slash facts in here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I trial by fire as well. When I took over four existing studies. One where we were actually a high enrolling site, and
Oh,
all the
wow.
coordinators just left. They just took off.
Yeah.
PIs took off. So I basically took over the company and knew nothing. I mean, I didn't even know the patient's phone numbers. If the patients didn't show up to the clinic, then I just assumed they're not in the study. So it was that bad. And then monitors were, well, they took me under their wings, to put it in a nice way. But yeah, definitely trial by fire. And I can relate to a lot of young Lisa's early encounters with research. So, what happened after that? How long did it take you to figure out how to be a coordinator?
I was a coordinator for about, gosh, less than a year, and I became a monitor.
Oh, that
Um,
fast.
yeah, I early on identified that I wanted to become a monitor. That's my problem. I kind of start something and then I want to go to the next level pretty quickly. But I was a coordinator for 8 or 9 months. I was trained by awesome monitors, and I'm still in touch with one to this day. And the PI that I worked for was a great person, taught me, took a chance on me. I believed in myself because I wanted the career. Once I started getting a sense of what it could do, how transforming it was, I held on for dear life and am thankful for every minute that I could spend learning to be a coordinator. I was a monitor gosh, on and off. I'm still a monitor a little bit. I've been a CRA manager, CRA trainer. I love to write.
Mm-hmm.
This is my first book, and I've written another one.
You have.
And I did the 2016 updates to the CRA's Guide to Monitoring Clinical Research. I didn't write the book,
Wow.
but I did the
Who
updates.
wrote the original book? Because I know which one you're talking about.
John Schneider and Karen Wooden, Dr. Karen Wooden and John Schneider.
Okay.
And I like to write, and clinical research, we have the opportunities to creatively train and educate people,
Mm-hmm.
like with books like you've written, like with books like I've written, conferences.
Yeah.
Make it interesting. And now there are so many courses and colleges and training companies like your academy and other places that, you know, give people the opportunity to
It's a different
learn this
world.
wonderful field.
It's
Yeah,
definitely a different world than the one we came into
for sure.
when we got started. Um, so what made you want to be a CRA so quickly? Like, well, you must have seen something that resonated with you from your monitors, or were you recruited by one of the monitors?
I wasn't recruited. I was a flight attendant before I became a nurse. I've
Okay.
always loved to travel, and I kind of saw it as an opportunity to take what I learned as a coordinator and be able to travel and learn more. So it's almost like the best of both worlds. So
Wow.
I wanted to I saw it as the stepping stone to the next level of my career,
Mm-hmm.
being a CRA. I don't know, you're a CRA as well, correct? Or you were a CRA?
I have one contract as an independent contractor, but that was more so I could learn the inside baseball of what it takes to be a CRA, so I could teach students better, and so
Yeah,
I could build my CRO better. So, killing multiple birds with one stone by doing that.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if I would enjoy being a CRA full time. This is what I tell my students. It's not for everyone. Like, well, you know better than me. What kind of person does it take to make a good CRA?
I think to make a good CRA, you have to have a strong work ethic. You have to be detail oriented. And having a medical background helps. It's not required. I've worked with people on and off who have not had a medical background. They've learned along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but it does help. And I think that you just have to be open to dealing with whatever situation comes to you the best you can, applying your knowledge, kind of like Lisa did in the book, just to reference back to it. Like my character was thrown a lot of curveballs, like the best study coordinators and CRAs have been. And she just took a deep breath and moved forward and did the best she could, referencing guidelines, referencing training. And I think that's the kind of person who could be a CRA.
Right. Um, and a lot of people that are going to be listening, they want to get in this industry, and CRA is like the brand name. I guess it's the household name for a clinical research position, because you don't really hear or see articles written about study coordinators too much, but CRAs you do. Like Forbes constantly has CRA, clinical research associate, as one of the top 5 careers to be in almost every year. So that's like the household name, and everybody wants to get into that, but they don't realize that there's so many other positions in this industry, starting with research assistants, research coordinators, in-house CRAs, CTAs, I mean, the list goes on. Trial master file. There's so many opportunities. Everyone's
Yes.
going for the CRA because it's the brand name, and everyone hears about the salaries. And that's not the way to get started. I mean, it's very rare that you're going to get somebody entry level that gets sent out to do monitoring. In those cases, you could become an entry level in house CRA, but even in those positions, I think those people got lucky to some extent, because typically the starting point is not as a CRA at all, even an in house CRA. So, one of the first things, and probably one of the most important things to put out there, is that it's it's probably you'll probably get an entry level position if you have no research experience, and then you could work your way up to being a CRA, or you may discover you don't want to be a CRA, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I always tell people who contact me about wanting to move into clinical research, the number one thing is you got to keep trying.
Yeah.
I mean, my position, I was a coordinator for a year. I had people who wanted me to succeed and who helped me, but it took me at least a year to get, into a CRA position. And that was pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, don't give up, keep trying. Like you said, um, coordinator to CRA, coordinator to CTM, data manager, trainer. I mean, I've worn a lot of different hats in clinical research,
Yeah, you do it
but it
all
all
pretty much.
pardon?
You do it all pretty much.
I don't know about that. I think that I would call you the one that does it all. But,
You
but
do it all well.
oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I just feel very fortunate to have this career. And I always include whenever I talk or train that it's life transforming and you are your own ceiling. So
It's a good point.
you'll work as hard as you can and you will succeed. And I try to convey in the book my experiences, the other experiences of people. It's a little humorous and a lot of good basic research training.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a work of fiction, like I said.
It's a fiction.
It's
Everybody understand this when you read it. It's a fiction. The character is Lisa, not Elizabeth.
and she is based on 20 different study coordinators I've met in my career.
There's another gal, Nadia, I think, from GCP Cafe. I've never
Yes.
met her, but she's writing a book too. She's I don't know much about it other than I follow her on Instagram, so I see some of her posts. So you're a pioneer. Uh, I mean, you started, and that's hers is a fiction book too. And I'm gonna write one. I'm gonna have a comprehensive guide to research. It's gonna be more of a textbook, but I do want to eventually write like a biography of my story about clinical research. But it will be all true stories, right? Um, so this is a great read for anybody curious about the industry. It's a very obscure industry. Still, very little is known about it, even though we just talked
True.
about all the trainings that are out there. So you're part of ACRP now, right? Well, what is your role with ACRP?
I work with ACRP not officially. I am a member, I am certified, and I have the good fortune of speaking at their conference. Sometimes this will be my third year. I'm speaking there this year.
Wow. Where is it going to be
But
this year?
it's outside of DC. And they're a fantastic organization. ACRP certification or SOCR certification. I encourage people to get their research certification because it just adds one more layer of credibility.
Yeah.
It won't necessarily get you a job versus not, but it just makes you look that much more authentic, in my opinion. And, both organizations are wonderful. I got my certification with ACRP back in 2004,
Hmm.
and they're just a fantastic
Their
organization.
exams are tough.
Yeah, I'm surprised. When I got the notification that I passed, I was so excited. But this is back, this is back before you started. This is back when they were doing it by paper.
Wow.
And you had to wait. I know, wow, now I'm dating myself. You had to wait 6 weeks to get your results.
Mm-hmm.
And the test was 3 hours.
I know. I put one of my employees through it when I first started. Um, she was my second or third coordinator, but she did not have a bachelor's degree. So I thought, okay, well, we can compensate for that because she was a great coordinator. We can compensate for that and become more attractive when sponsors come visit us for site selection visits if you get certified. So I sent her through the ACRP test. This was back in '05, '06, and she failed 3 times, and she knew her stuff. And then we have students reaching out to me now, people that are completely new to the industry, and they think that they can take this test and that it's simple and that they'll get certified. It doesn't work that way. First of all, you don't even qualify unless you have 2 years of experience,
Right.
right? So
Right.
you need those entry level training programs, which is my academy. There's a few others. I think mine's the best. Actually, take that back. I know mine is the best, but ACRP is great, but you need 2 years of experience first, and even then, it's tough. I've never taken it, but my employee has taken it. It took her 3 attempts to pass. Three. She was crying.
Did your employee attempt pass ultimately?
Yeah, she was in tears though after the second one. I was like, "No, we're gonna do it again," and I paid for it. I'm the employer, and her being certified was a value add to my company because back then, and I think they still care now, but they care less about credentials now when it comes to coordinators. But back then, if you didn't have a bachelor's degree as a coordinator, it was kind of frowned upon. So we were really trying to push for this ACRP for her, and she finally was able to do it.
Well, congratulations to her for doing it, and how nice of you to encourage her to do that and push her along because, it's a hard test.
And she's still
But
with us, still with
when
us.
you, well, good for her, and my kudos off to her because I studied and studied for the test. And after I took it, I didn't think I had passed. And when I found out I passed, I mean, I literally jumped up and down and screamed, and everyone who lived in the condo complex where I lived at the time thought something was wrong. But I was like, nope, I just got my CRP certification. And they were looking at me like, yeah, we have no idea what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
So,
I always encourage students when they're trying to get into this industry. Um, one of the quickest hacks to do anything in life, forget about research, is to be around other people who are doing or are where you want to go. All right. So simply hanging around with more clinical researchers is a great way to get your foot in the door, right? It may not happen immediately, but it'd almost be impossible for you to hang around a bunch of clinical researchers regularly and not have good opportunities presented to you, right?
I absolutely agree with you.
So ACRP chapters are important, and they're open. You don't need to be an ACRP member to attend some of the meetings, right?
I don't believe so. I'm not positive. I can find out for you. In San Diego, they have a chapter, and I've been to one or two meetings, and they were very interesting. Other chapters are active as well. I've never had the pleasure of going to another chapter meeting, but the one in San Diego, they had a meeting at Scripps Clinic in La
Mm-hmm.
Jolla, and it was it was a great meeting. So, but
Yeah.
getting involved in the chapters, ACRP is great because they have webinars, training, continuing education credit opportunities. I mean, you know all this, but I would encourage anybody to go to acrpnet.org, their
Okay.
website, to find out about signing up. And the conference is this year, and it's such an awesome even networking opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So
And these days, another thing that is very prevalent now in 2018 that was not the case in 2005 when I started is social media. So, if you want to network with other researchers, you can go to LinkedIn. You can go to Facebook. There's groups for clinical researchers on Facebook, and you just join in on the conversation. Get to know people. Don't start asking for things right away because you're going to get ignored, but just contribute, have something, or ask questions, right? That's a great way to start networking. Then people are going to start to know who you are, so you don't even need to physically go anywhere to network in 2018. You can stay in bed in your pajamas and go on LinkedIn and interact with thousands of people. It's never been easier to network than it is. I mean, I wish, and I'm sure you do as well, I wish we had some of these tools back when I was starting. Even a book like this. There was nothing when I started out except Center Watch, which I subscribed to and paid a ridiculous amount of money to get a newsletter. But that was like, I was willing to do that because that was the only thing out there. And now we have so many resources, or so many more resources than we had back then. So you guys and gals getting into the industry now, you're actually lucky because there's a good amount of resources out there. And there's
College courses.
college courses. Yeah, there's even college courses. So talk about those.
Well, I mean, I don't know a lot about the exact courses. Like I know that I think UCSD in San Diego,
Yeah.
they forever have had an extension course on clinical research, but now you have universities online with master's degrees in clinical research and adjunct instructors who are clinical research professionals who teach online. I mean, it's amazing
Mm-hmm.
compared to when I started, and we were still on oh gosh, what was that archaic email before Outlook? What am I trying?
Uh
Lotus Notes.
oh,
Lotus.
Lotus Notes. I started out with Yahoo and
What?
AOL.
I remember back when I started, we had two computers. We had a computer for work and we had a computer for EDC. And when I was a coordinator, I had two computers. And then when I was a monitor, 16 years ago, 15 years ago, I would take two computers for a while to the site. So, clinical research has evolved and grown, and it's so exciting. I mean,
Yeah, every
so
industry's
exciting.
been disrupted. I mean, this industry, I when I started, uh, 2005. Actually, I was part time in '99 when I was in college, '99 to '04. I was doing research part time. I didn't even know how to really use email back then. Like, I had an account. I kind of knew how to use it, but I wasn't like proficient like I am now. I still don't think I'm proficient in email, but you don't have to be anymore. It's just like it's a commodity. But back then, I remember my first monitor um, wanted me to correspond with her, and she would send me letters, and I suggested she email me, and this was like it was like I was speaking a different language. I mean, and that was just 12 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, right?
Wow.
So time
Yeah.
flies. It like technology shifts. Can you imagine networking with thousands of researchers like we can on LinkedIn and on Facebook back then? I mean, nobody. The only time people would network would be investigator meetings, and you'd have to wait for new studies. And then they had all these conferences too, which you can still go to. But times have changed a lot, and you can all take advantage of it, and you should take advantage of it.
Well, I think that I once wrote an article for ACRP magazine called "How I Envision Clinical Research in the Future," and it's so funny because it was kind of a George Jetson type research themed, but some of the things have come true, like risk-based monitoring
Yeah.
and patient-reported outcome instruments, and like you said, research networking and GCP Cafe and ACRP meetings, and I mean, we're certainly lucky to be in this industry who's utilizes the technology to further education and research, and people like you who have this opportunity to educate and make it interesting. And that's what I'm all about, trying to educate everybody about clinical research, but in a way that's relatable and fun. And that was the inspiration for the book, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
you have all these coordinators and all these wonderful people who have these stories about starting in clinical research trial by fire. And it kind of like my tribute to the coordinators and everything we learned and everything we passed on.
Right.
The most important things, my first monitor who trained me, who is still to this day a friend of mine, when I said, and she helped me get my first monitoring job, I said, what can I do to repay you? And she said to me, pay it forward.
Really.
And it's like, do it for someone else. So I always try to, when people write me about how can I get started, what can I do, I always try to give them advice. I don't have every answer, but I try to help because I was helped. And I'm sure you were too. So,
Yes. And I had three monitors take me under their wings, and so part of it. So I upset them early on because I led on that I knew a lot more than I did because I was afraid of losing the study. So they
yeah.
thought I was somebody who kind of knew what they were doing, and then they realized I didn't, and so they slowed down to kind of mentor me, and they didn't have to. They could have taken the study away. They could have put us on a screening hold, and believe me, the last thing I wanted to do at that point was continue to screen, so I was willing to learn. And it took me a good year to figure out the basics of how to run a study from the perspective of a coordinator. And
Yeah.
by the way, I'm still learning things today. Like I'm joining this biotech incubator, so I'm learning a lot more now from the sponsor side of things, like submissions to the FDA and a lot more like regulatory affairs type of things. So you're never done learning, and the technology changes, so you need to adapt and continue to learn.
No, I agree, and I'm still learning things to this day as well. And I hope it never stops because I mean, when I was a coordinator and then when I came a monitor, the more I learned, the more I realized what I didn't know, and the more I appreciated what I did know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
So what do you think the future of the industry, let's say in the next 10 years? A lot of people are saying that sponsors are now bringing everything back in house slowly. All the CROs, I mean, they've all merged with somebody else. So they're like lab CRO hybrids for the most part now. Um, there's startup CROs like mine that are boutique. That there's still a huge market for those players. Um, Namely biotech companies that need some hand holding that some of the larger CROs are not able to do or don't want to do. But where do you see the industry going? And this is just predictions, but I mean, where I'd be curious to get your perspective on this.
what I can say is what two changes that I've seen that I'm thankful for are more emphasis on mentoring because I've seen shifts where there's more positions than CRAs to fill them. Then for a while there were more CRAs than positions. And now it kind of seems like the upward slope again, where there's more positions than CRAs.
By far.
Yeah. I've seen a shift where there's more openness to people with less than 3 years experience. Mentoring is really important with regards to that. So I see more openness towards wanting skilled and trained people, but maybe a little bit more willingness to learn and train versus you can't get started unless you have X amount of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I also see um, patient centricity as far as patients being more involved with uh, clinical trials, as far as more knowledgeable, more understanding, and more part of their care, I guess I'm trying to say.
What does patient centricity mean to you?
Patient centricity means to me that a patient is more aware, involved in their role as a clinical trials patient. Um, that's just my interpretation. What does it mean to you?
That's a good question. So, unfortunately, what it means to me is an industry buzzword. That so it's an ideal that I don't think is going to be realized anytime soon. Unfortunately, I know there's a lot of sponsors out there that are actually proactively getting patient advocacy groups involved, and there's a whole e-patient movement. And so you have a few big pharma that are trying to make patient centricity a real thing, but you have a lot of the majority of the other stakeholders in the industry that don't want to invest in the long term, because that's a long term investment, getting patients involved in studies, and they'd rather deal in the short term of, hey, we need to fill this study right now because we want to end enrollment in 6 months. So I see a lot more of that than I do long term investment in getting patients engaged. And I think there's still a lot of fear from pharma, and with good reason. How I'm all for social media, but there is I kind of understand some of the reservations pharma have when it comes to patients communicating online, and then big pharma having the responsibility of reporting AEs based on social media conversations, or is that just branding? So there's a lot of that I think we're going to need. And I know the FDA released guidance on social media communication, for patients, but there's going to need to be a lot more, I guess, rules or guidelines that we can feel comfortable exploring creative strategies. Because right now, this is not an environment that's conducive to experimentation when it comes to getting patients engaged. So that's what patient centricity means to me. Um, but time as technology, and it's gonna have to change because clinical trials are way too expensive, and I think personalized medicine is gonna have a big role to play here, as well as risk-based monitoring and big data, and then pharma kind of bringing more of the operations in-house. I think that's gonna get patients a little more engaged as well. Um, Talk about the mentorship, because I hear that those things go on, but I've never worked at a big CRO. Do I know some have formal mentorship programs? Is that right?
I have worked for CROs that had formal mentoring programs, and it was just something that really helped with training, with employee retention.
Mm.
I spoke at ACRP about how to build a mentoring program and create a mentoring program last year, and I also did a webinar about it. And
Wow.
it's kind of the most important take home, I think, is anyone can be a mentor. Like there might be a misconception that a mentor is somebody who has to be older.
Mm-hmm.
And the message that I wanted to drive home when I spoke about it was I've been mentored by people who were younger than me, but who had experience. And it was a fantastic coupling. And I've mentored people who, well, a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
And it's been a great thing. I just think there needs to be education, promotion, understanding, and mentoring in an environment where there's no subordinate leader, but there's people who are colleagues, kind of like the partnership of the study coordinator and the CRA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is
So,
there
and I,
are there formal positions within CROs that, like CRAs, like, hey, Elizabeth, you're gonna be a mentor to our newer CRAs. Like, has anyone ever asked you to do that? Because I think that would not be a bad idea to be implemented, especially like you said for retention purposes.
I have served in a mentoring role a couple times, and it's something that I enjoyed because it gave me an opportunity to take part in somebody's career progression
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully impart any information and wisdom that I could for them. But I also learned along the way. And I feel like I am a true example of somebody who succeeded from a mentor because the person who my first mentor in the industry was my first monitor. And when I was a coordinator, and she helped me become a
Yeah,
CRA, and she was my first line manager. So, I mean, and we're still 18 years later, we're still colleagues. So,
that's fantastic. So,
yeah.
see, Lucky, one of the coordinators leaving. Speaking of mentor, he's one of our interns here. He'll be a good. He's interested in research. I think he has good potential if that's the route he chooses to go. He's still figuring it out. But yeah, we have interns come here all the time, help me out with things, learn the ropes. Sometimes they get hired, and sometimes they want to go on and do other things. But yeah, that was a timely uh, guest appearance by Lucky. Too bad he wasn't on camera. A lot of good stories in this work of fiction, Elizabeth. Um, where can people find it? I'll have the links underneath to Amazon.
It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm.
And if you Google and find it, it's available in a lot of different places.
And where can people find you? Where do you prefer they reach out to you?
Um, ebwcra@yahoo.com. My email.
EDW.
eb
Oh, EB.
ebwcra
Uh-huh.
at Yahoo.
Wow, you give your email address out. Elizabeth, you're about to get bombarded. We're going to test your mentorship capabilities with Guru Nation's going to be emailing you.
Hey, then thank you. I look forward to it.
You'll be changing your email shortly. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we need to meet up sometime. You're in San Diego. I'm in Orange County. We're not that far. I want to do a monthly meetup for Orange County researchers because I don't think a CRP is out here from what I've been able to Google, but maybe I'm mistaken. But we're working on something, and then that's in preparation for the bigger nationwide conference that I'm planning, which is probably 15 months away. But the meetups, the local meetups, can get started like as early as next month. So if you're ever interested in networking up here, I know San Diego's got a huge community of researchers. Orange County is big too. We have 4 million people in this tiny county. That's like a country. And there's a lot of researchers out here. So would love to further network with you and meet up sometime.
You're only an hour and 15 minutes up the freeway. I'd love to.
That's right, with no traffic.
Yeah, with no traffic. Good luck.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching or listening to Dan. And this was Elizabeth Weeks Rowe on the Clinical Trials Guru, author of Clinical Research Trials and Triumphs. A really good book, easy read. You can read it in an afternoon and get the gist of what it takes to be a clinical researcher. I mean, it's entertaining, and I think everyone who's curious about this industry should read it. So thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.